Welcome, everyone. This session is Peer Talk, Local Impact Investing in Action. First, I'm very excited to be here with all of you, and I'm really looking forward for the conversation. I'm going to pass it to Deb, who is going to kickstart us. So Deb, I hand the mic over to you.
Thank you, Catalina. I'm Deb Markley. I'm Senior Vice President with LOCUS Impact Investing. We're a national nonprofit consulting firm and registered investment advisory firm. And I just want to start out by saying that we really have a strongly held belief at LOCUS that philanthropy needs to partner and work alongside communities to grow economies that work for everybody. And that's why we're really passionate about the work we've been doing with community foundations and the work that community foundations are doing to step into this local impact investing space. I'm really excited today to be joined by two of those community foundation leaders really in the field of local impact investing. Valerie Berenson is the investment analyst at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, a real early adopter in this field. And Jillian Rosen is Vice President for Community Investment at the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, a new-ish but committed local impact investor. And you're going to have a chance to really dig into and hear from them in just a minute. But before we jump in, I just want to offer a definition of local impact investing, because the field of impact investing is really broad and includes a wide range of vehicles, from environmental, social, and governance screening of your portfolio to investing in sector or impact-focused funds like green funds or affordable housing funds. But the work we're going to dig into today is that of local impact investing, investing into local businesses, organizations, intermediaries, with the goal of both financial return and community impact. That's the alignment with the impact investing field. And in this definition, we really see local impact investing as an act of returning or reinvesting wealth that was created in communities back into those communities. To be a bit balder about it, bringing it home from Wall Street to Main Street. And you'll see that in the two stories that we're going to talk about today. And you'll see that the definition of community is varied. It could be a state or a multi-state region. It could be a single county or a neighborhood in an urban area. But what's really important in this work is the concept of place and reinvesting in place to create equitable prosperity and wealth building for all. So that's the framing of the work that we're going to focus on today. I'd like to start by asking Valerie to spend about 10 minutes giving us an overview of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation's journey with local impact investing. So I'm going to turn it over to Valerie and let her share their story.
Yeah, thank you. So,
sorry, I'm going to jump in. Sorry to interrupt. I did want to highlight for those that have just entered, welcome. And then for everyone, you will have the on Pathable right now, you can have access to all of the presentations. So if you want a copy, you can access them there. And with that said, Val, go ahead.
Great. So hello, everyone. My name is Val Berenson. I'm the investment analyst at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. I sit, as my title would sound, on the finance team at the foundation. So we have about just over $1 billion in assets. We hit that high water mark at the end of the second quarter. About 850,000 of those assets are invested kind of what we would refer to as traditionally in our long-term pool, commingled vehicle. And then we have three other pools. One is an advisor managed option, and then we have a sustainable investment pool, and then we have the impact investment pool. So I'm here today to talk about the impact investment pool. That pool, I just finished the reconciliation for Q3. So these are brand new, fresh numbers. We just are over about 15 million. We have 15.3 million in the impact investing pool. So here are just the three options that I mentioned before. So we have 850 million in the long-term pool, about 80 million in the advisor managed pool, and then 20 million in the sustainable pool and 15 million in the impact investment pool. But I will say that the impact investment pool is definitely the one that and the sustainable pool garner the most interest, and we view it as a pool. Both of those pools are going to be growing down the road. So we are happy to have kind of the shell of the portfolio available for investment. And the sustainable pool is more of a globally oriented portfolio and invests in mutual funds and fixed income with a sustainable investment lens. And then our impact investment pool is, as Deb said, more of a place-based option. So it's for donors who would like to put their donor advised fund dollars in investments that go into the state of New Hampshire. So moving on to the next slide. This is just a little bit of our history. We have been doing impact investing for quite a.
Sorry again to interrupt you again. Right now we're not following on the slide, so you might want to hit present. Right now we're seeing impact investing and the introductory slide. So if you go, there you go. No worries, take your time. I was just making sure.
Can you see that?
No, we're seeing the outline on the initial slide.
How's that?
Good. Good. I think we're also seeing the outline, but I think that this works.
I think we're going to have to deal with it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Sorry about that. This is just a timeline of our history of investing at the foundation. So we started in the early 1970s with a nonprofit loan. And then in 1983, we helped start the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, which is the largest CDFI in the state of New Hampshire. We continued to do more debt-based investments for the next 20, 30 years with what we would consider sort of below market rate returns. And then in 2019, the board provided the staff with the mandate to do some intense research and really develop an impact investment fund that was launched in 2016. So that's what we have today. This $15 million in our impact investment fund, we seek a 5% blended return in this portfolio. So I think a lot of impact investors are more open to a lower return, where we have donor advised funds in this pool, and we have a spending rate that most of the donors follow of about 4 to 5%. We really have to hit that 5% blended rate of return target in this portfolio. So it kind of narrows down our opportunity set in terms of investments. So this is how this bullseye is our very non-fancy way of thinking about investments that could get into this pool. So in an ideal world, an investment would really hit the center of the bullseye there. It would be New Hampshire based with a high social environmental impact and what we would deem to be a high risk adjusted financial return. I can't say that we have any in our pool that meet all of those center of the bullseye at the moment, but that's how we work with our impact investment committee to flesh out if the investment at hand would be a good fit for the portfolio. So something that might be more New England oriented, but super high impact might have a better chance of getting in there, even if it's very New Hampshire centric, but maybe not low impact, or maybe only a 2% return. So we're kind of ebbing and flowing across those three pieces of the pie there. And I wanted to share an example of one. So this is Tracy Street. It's an affordable housing building. We worked with a nonprofit developer called Twin Pines Housing. They work in New Hampshire and Vermont. This property happens to be in New Hampshire. But what we were able to provide them was essentially a line of credit. So they have access to up to $300,000 to draw down on for the pre-development stage of investment properties. So a lot of times that pre-development stage is a hard stage to find financing for. And so what we wanted to be able to provide is really this catalytic capital that once they have access to the pre-development financing, they can then do the work and go out and seek probably more traditional financing. But that original line that is harder to access is something that we were able to provide. So we provided the pre-development financing for this property. I believe there are 30 units of affordable housing. This is in the Upper Valley of New Hampshire. And so just to share where this landed. So this one is probably the closest to the center of the bullseye that we have in our current pool. So it's right in New Hampshire, kind of borders on Vermont, but that's still part of our service area. We felt the social impact was between moderate and high, and then the risk-adjusted financial return was between moderate and high as well. So that is a really kind of sweet spot investment for us. This slide here, and I'll kind of breeze through it, but I'm happy to answer more questions as we go on. I just thought it kind of nicely showed all of the different components that are important to consider when kind of starting an impact investing program at a foundation. So I think the first one is the governance piece. Who's going to be overseeing the decisions, the investment decisions that are, going to need to happen for investments to be made? At the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, we have a separate impact investment committee, which has actually been really helpful in being able to deploy capital perhaps a little bit more faster than we would otherwise if the impact investment committee fell under the purview of our more traditional investment committee. So just to say that another way, we have an investment committee that oversees the other three pools that I shared at the beginning of the conversation. And then we have a separate impact investment committee. The folks on that committee have a little bit different skill set. They're more, perhaps have more community investment background or program officer type skill set, but we also have some finance folks on that committee. So it's a really helpful group of folks to move the program along. I think part of that oversight piece too is having that investment policy statement. So at the moment we have a separate impact investment policy statement. The asset allocation for this pool is a little bit heavier in the fixed income space, which is just a function of the opportunities available to us. So the asset allocation for this pool differs a fair amount from the other pools, which is one of the handful of reasons why we have a separate investment policy statement. And then kind of just going into the other pieces, I think one other component of this that's been really helpful for our success is having resources from both the program officer side that we call the community impact team and the finance team. So I have a colleague who's a senior program officer that I work really closely with when we're reviewing potential investments and doing ongoing monitoring and due diligence of our existing investment portfolio. And he really focuses on the community impact piece and the social impact piece and any sort of measurement we're looking to do there. And my role as the investment analyst is to work more on the finance side. I'm a CPA and have an accounting and finance background. I was previously an equities analyst at Prime Buchholz, an investment consulting firm. So I really have more of the institutional investment background. So having a senior program officer and someone with the investment credentials working together has been really helpful to move this along. And then just my final slide here with figures. We are a little bit messy in how we measure our impact. I would love to say we have a really easy formula. We just kind of drop numbers in and it spits out all this information, but it's certainly not that way. As I said, my colleague, Simon Delecta on the program side is the one who works on the impact measurement, but we really kind of take a case-by-case approach to how we assess our impact. Obviously the affordable housing units, the example I shared, it falls under that. We've lent money to a food co-op that's helped provide some New Hampshire-based jobs. So we try to be consistent year over year in our approach to measurement, but it really is a case-by-case approach to how we do that measurement. And then in the bottom right corner, it's kind of small, but you can see that we've been able to almost meet our 5% rate of return goal since inception. It's 4.8%. This is as of the end of 2020. So for 2020, we did hit right at 5%. So we've had some success on the return front. I think I'll end there, and hopefully that made some sense. Sorry again about the PowerPoint snafu at the beginning, but I'll hand it over to Jillian and then look forward to answering questions after. There we go.
Thanks, Val, for the handoff. I'm gonna get my presentation up there, which is always this is like the moment. Does it work? We've practiced.
Yeah.
Does it work? Okay, great. So great to be here with all of you. It's really wonderful that we all got to hear what a mature, sophisticated, and really exciting program looks like after decades of it being in operation, and it inspires me. And I was like taking down notes, like, oh, okay, I got to take this back to the team. So I'm going to share our program at the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, which is maybe it's a toddler. I think it's a waddler. It's not an infant anymore, but it might be in the waddler category. And I think it'll make for a really great discussion with you all on what's possible in your communities. So, I always remind myself to ground our impact investing program in our place, which is Washtenaw County, Michigan. We are a population of about 350,000 people. We have 5 institutes of higher education. About 40% of our population falls into the ALICE category of asset limited, income constrained, and employed, sort of the methodology that United Way has come up to look both at those in poverty and those right at the margins of it. So 40% of our neighbors are in that precarious position. It's estimated that by 2022, however, that our unemployment will be near 2%, which is essentially functional zero unemployment in the county, and yet 40% of us are quite financially precarious. We are the 8th most economically segregated county in the entire country. There is nearly a 20-year disparity in lifespan based on race and zip code. So an entire generational gap based on your race and based on your zip code in our community. Black infant mortality is twice that of white infant mortality. And much like I imagine the communities you live in and serve, COVID has disproportionately affected and caused harm in communities of color. So I'm starting there because I hope I continue to stoke in myself and maybe get you curious in your community about the dissatisfaction with the status quo. If grant making could have gotten us there to reduce or eradicate those inequities and disparities, it would have worked, and it hasn't. And so our community foundation has come up with the why of impact investing, which is that we want to focus on racial and social equities so that all neighborhood and communities in Washtenaw County now have the same opportunity for generational human dignity with equitable access to our collective community wealth. Our board back in 2019 approved an additional investment in a policy for impact investing, which allocated 1% of assets. And just in 2 short years, they went from 1% of assets to 5% of assets, which is really exciting. So we need to deploy about $10 million of capital in our community, which I think we're up for the challenge. Involved in it deeply involved is our board, an impact investing committee, staff, donors, and the community, and all have their fingers in presence in how we're building out our program. I think about our journey as from dipping in a toe to a full body jump, which we went much more accelerated than I thought we would. I thought we would be much more incremental, but there's something about, I don't know, maybe it's the J curve that like once you get going, it's like you got to get all in. But we started with our board learning about this and having them become educated and fluid in impact investing, so that this wasn't something that was just segregated to staff or a staff member, but that our whole board was working towards understanding of what impact investing was and how does it make sense in our context in our community. We did a ton of benchmarking in the field. Our colleagues at the New Hampshire Community Foundation provided a North Star on what it looks like to do this over decades, but also looked at foundations that were about our size. So we were about 120 million in assets when we started impact investing. So we were looking at that 150 benchmarking of what was happening in the community foundation field with impact investing in that asset size. And it really showed that we weren't going to be on the bleeding edge, that many community foundations were already doing this work. And that was very helpful for our board. While they wanted innovation, there's also risk with this. And so I think it helped build a mindset that was okay to take this risk because they saw peers doing it as well. We then invested in staff joining fellowships and networks. Seminal in my ability to lead this work was a fellowship with, it's now called Common Future, but it used to be called Bali. That's where I got to meet Deb, which was fantastic. And other networks like Mission Investors Exchange. These have been so helpful in supporting our growth of this work and taking a call when you say, we don't know what to do. What do you think about this deal? Because you can't do this work in a silo. And I think you heard Val speak to that there's internally, there's crossover between departments on this, as well as I think externally, you need to have partners with you in this work. It cannot be accomplished alone. We then brought action to the board and they were ready to go much earlier than we thought they would. So we just jumped right in. And now we have to continue a growth mindset that we're not quite satisfied with what we've got going and that there's always opportunity for more. So how can we continue to balance our overall portfolio so that it supports impact investing, but and isn't just a carve out? And so that's the mindset we're moving to, is how does the entire portfolio of investable assets support more and more growth in impact investing? Our process is a 4-part process. It's probably very similar. I'll share that the circles size are relative to the amount of time and resource that you need. So we do a preliminary review. Then we do, if it goes through a committee process, if there's interest, then we advance that to much deeper due diligence, where we often bring in outside experts to do our underwriting. Internally, we do not have that expertise, nor do we want it. So we really rely on external experts to support that. Then it goes back to committee for a vote, and then it goes to our full board. I'll share that we're rethinking whether our full board needs to be providing approval on deal by deal. While it was great for building their awareness of what impact investing was, it does also potentially slow us down. And so we're thinking about what the right governance structure is for the way our program is growing right now. Then we do our closing documents, and we also use expert counsel. We don't have in-house counsel at the Community Foundation, so we engage with outside counsel to review all of our documents. We try to create templates where possible so we can just reuse those. And if anyone's curious about those, I'd be happy to share them. Please reach out. Nothing proprietary in them. But we try to create standardized documents so that we can just move quickly through this final step, which gets us to the exciting part of launching and then ongoing support. And unlike how we approached our grant making, which is probably a little bit hands-off, with the idea that our nonprofits can run with this is what they're suited to do. With impact investing, we've offered our investees the opportunity to be in close operational relationship with us. We meet either monthly or bi-monthly, and we want to grow the ecosystem here. We fully trust our investees to do the work they are being invested to do, but we also recognize this as a moment to build our local ecosystem capacity. Which gets me to what's our investment strategy. And right now we are focusing on investing in intermediaries. We love intermediaries. They are our primary strategy so that we can deploy capital smartly and quickly in our community. We find that intermediaries like a CDFI bring expertise that we do not have internal to the foundation. And they're also flexible, creative partners that can leverage external capital to come into our community. We've deployed about $2 million so far. The table here shows where we've been investing our assets. And we hope to be growing this with more intermediaries and eventually growing to be able to do direct deals. I'll end with a vision for what I thought it could be. So even if we put all $200+ million of our assets at work, we know that we wouldn't actually be able to create the change that we wanted. In theory, I think of it like we'd have the money, we'd invest it in businesses or in CDFIs. It would go to our creative community to do great work, whether that's a grocery store, whether that's affordable housing projects. The work would get done and the capital would be recycled. And so like that's the goal in my mind on how we get to a more equitable, inclusive economy. But it's really, it's quite more complicated. And I think the Center for Community Investment for this graphic here on the right, which is actually much more what it looks like. Impact investing is multi-layered, complex. Some might say messy, and I don't think messy is bad there, but there's so much complexity going on that we need to build our local ecosystem to be attuned so that we're reducing friction in this marketplace. I think it turns off a lot of investors on how complex it can be. And so if we can build an ecosystem that allows more and more capital to flow into community, building community wealth, and then returning that wealth into the community, I feel like we will have far surpassed whatever asset size we're at, but that we can bring in more capital into communities that have been historically underinvested in. So I'm going to stop there.
Sorry, I had a little trouble getting off mute there. Thanks, Val. Thanks, Jillian. What I'm going to encourage you all to put questions in the chat. And a reminder again, we're using the Pathable chat. I want to ask just a couple of questions to get us started, and then we'll make sure to tee up any that show up in chat. The word donor appeared in your stories in a couple of different ways, and I wonder, it's one of the unique things about community foundations. You do have donors out there that can be engaged in a variety of ways in this work. And I wonder if you could just speak to how you've engaged donors, what you're hearing from them as you launch into this kind of work. And Jillian, why don't we start with you and then we'll go to Val.
Great. Well, a number of our donors have been pushing us to do impact investing. It's something that's of interest to them personally. And so we had a couple of ready-made donors who wanted us to be active in this space. So they kind of gave us a friendly nudge. And well, we didn't build our impact investing program tailored to the needs of donors. We've always considered them to be potential co-investors. And in last spring, actually, we hosted an investor salon where we invited local financial institutions, other capital influencers or capital providers, but also focused on inviting those who held donor advised funds with us to co-invest in our portfolio. And we, coming out of that event, we raised almost $600,000 on top of our $2 million of investments to be co-investing across our portfolio. So donors are a great asset. I think that they're hungry for more impact, and it's a great way to balance, frankly, the endowment model, which is long-term preservation of capital, rights, CPI +5. Donor advised funds can really help you put more catalytic capital out in the now. Of course, we want it all back and we want to preserve that investment, but they allow us to actually move a little bit, potentially a little bit quicker in our current stage than if we were, just constantly going back to the board for one, an additional 1%, 1%. Yeah. And I would say that they're taking a leap of faith. We don't know the impact yet. We're just 3 years in, so we can't even yet tell them definitively this has made the difference, but they're willing to take that leap with us and have really pushed us to keep going farther.
Val?
Yeah, thanks. So we are actually somewhat in a state of flux. We are on the tail end of a strategic planning process that's been over a year long. So it feels as though the direction of that strategic planning process is going to be incorporating impact investing, ESG, and aligning all of our investments with our values. And that's of course going to be a large undertaking, but I think there's going to be opportunity for more donor engagement than we're currently doing. So I would kind of note that as kind of a sidebar of our current donor engagement. So the impact investment pool has about 25 donor advised funds in it. And then it also has a carve out from our long-term pool. So for a donor advised fund to have an account in the impact investment pool, they had to be willing to commit to either a 5 or 10 year lockup period. So that was the way for us to ensure that we would have this kind of patient capital, given that, while we had been doing impact investing for a really long time, this whole concept of a pool with donor advised fund dollars, we wanted to make sure that we wouldn't have donors calling to kind of make large grants out of their fund when the capital was locked up in the impact investment program. So donors on the whole seem interested in it. I think that given the size of the foundation relative to the size of the impact investment pool, I'd say at this point, there's a lot of talk and a lot of interest, but not as much implementing as kind of we would like. And I think part of that is on us, the finance team and my colleagues in community impact. We're talking about how we can educate internally a little bit more, the folks on the philanthropy team who speak with prospective donors and existing donors to kind of share the work that we're doing in the impact investment pool. So I would say that we haven't done the best job, somewhat by design, as we're still trying to flesh out what we want this program to look like. We haven't done the best job educating donors of the opportunity in the impact investment pool. It's more been targeted to donors who have kind of mentioned that it'd be something that they'd be interested in. And then we say, oh, okay, we have this here. I think one other comment I would make is I noted that for the impact investment pool, we have that 5% somewhat high hurdle rate of return for investments. We do have another pool called the nonprofit loan program. And we see some demand from donors looking for, like Jillian said, those more really high impact opportunities, but maybe not as high of a return. So what we would call a program related investment, we don't really have those in the community foundation space, but maybe a 1 or 2% return, or even just return of invested capital. That pool of capital is quite small at the moment. It's less than $1 million, but that's another part of our strategic planning work, is that we're trying to engage donors on the need for that capital, especially in this interest rate environment where it's so low. It's most of the investment opportunities that we're finding, they're able to access traditional financing. I don't know. I would say that we're not really hitting a home run on the donor engagement at this point.
So I want to turn to the board for a minute. I would imagine we probably have a range of folks on as part of this conversation today, from folks just thinking about this to some experienced local investors. But that question of how do you engage the board, and what kinds of information did you find to be persuasive with them? What kinds of questions were you getting from the board that you really had to address over the course of this journey? And I'll start with Val on this one, but Jillian, I'm also interested in how you think the board is going to react if you say, oh, don't worry, you don't have to look at every investment anymore, we'll take care of it. But I'll let you think on that one. Val, how have you engaged the board in the work, especially over such a long period of time?
So we don't address the board very often. How we've been able to have sort of a connection to the board is that we have 2 members of the statewide board sitting on the Impact Investment Committee. And that's just a way to have some continuity and for those two members to share and report back to the statewide board, the work that's being done on the impact within the Impact Investment Committee. I think that in terms of questions that we've fielded, it's more been are we sacrificing return? And I feel like I kind of thought we were at a place where maybe we were beyond that discussion, but it's definitely still one that we're having. And you know, there's been, even as we think about moving our broader portfolio into a more values aligned investments, we're still having you know, a handful of naysayers on the board really concerned about this fulfilling our fiduciary duty to achieve maximum financial return, and some concerns that we're kind of leaving money on the table by only focusing on certain sectors and not having a kind of broader opportunity set. So that's been the conversations we've had to have, and frankly, we're kind of at a point where we're gonna probably be saying thank you for the input. We hear you, but we disagree as a at this foundation, and we're gonna, you know, onward. So it certainly hasn't been without a bit of friction.
Yeah. So the biggest impediment before we got really started was our Investment and Finance Committee. They held a lot of power and sway over the board on whether they were willing to be receptive to impact investing. So our former CEO and I sort of hatched an idea that we would create an impact investing committee that directly reported to the board and not to the Investment and Finance Committee. And we populated that committee with trustees only. So basically what we did is we took a third of the board, got them so psyched up about impact investing and the potential of using our philanthropic assets to do more good in our community. And honestly, right, like if you think about how do you do social change, we basically sort of stacked the deck that we had champions and allies who, whether we were, you know, critiqued and curious and really thinking like, how do we make this the best opportunity for the Community Foundation and for the community? So it wasn't like they were blindly following anything. They were active allies, but also providing critiques, concerns, risk mitigation. And so basically a third of our board is already on this committee and provides a lot of, is able to speak confidently and fluently on the board about the work. We provide regular updates. Basically our board meets 6 times a year, and every packet they get, even if there isn't an action item, we're providing some type of written update to the board. And after every impact investing committee, we think about what cascading messages have to go out to different stakeholders. And we I regularly go and give updates to our Investment and Finance Committee and to our Central Grant Making Committee, so that we're not siloing impact investing even in its infancy, but we're trying to make that connection really explicit. Like, we're here to help fulfill the same mission you all are, and it's going to take us working together. I'll say our Investment and Finance Committee in the last 2.5 years, I don't know if we're populating it with more people that are interested in impact investing, or the marketplace has just shifted to make it a more palatable, accepted form of how to invest capital. They're much more excited about pieces. In fact, at one point, one of the people on our Investment and Finance Committee was being like, wow, the rate of return that you're getting is a lot higher than I would think. Are you going to like renegotiate down your interest rate? And I was like, no. And I was so surprised that this was coming from the Investment and Finance Committee. So I would say we took a strategy of over communication and continuous communication, and we're not going to let up on that. Probably at least for the next, I would think the next 5 years, because I think until we get fully deployed $10 million and maybe even going back for another increase of 5%, I think we're gonna have to keep everyone really close to the work. And just so you know, the board is the one that told us that they don't want to be approving deal by deals, which was a great vote of confidence.
Yeah,
So.
that's great. I know that there's a couple of questions in the chat. I want to ask one more question about community partners, and intermediaries have been a big part of your strategies in both cases. And I just wonder if you could speak a little bit to the reaction you've gotten from some community partners, maybe even some of the ones that may not be your investees, but folks in your community who do economic development work, how supportive they've been of the foundation taking on these kinds of roles. And also advice for foundation folks on this call who may not have CDFIs in their community that are quite as easy to, so it's a little harder to find the intermediaries that they might partner with. So just what's your experience been with those community partners? Jillian, go ahead.
Yeah, so we actually don't have very many CDFIs in our community, and that's one of the pieces I'm tasked with, getting more CDFI activity in our community. So I'm still figuring out what's the message, what entices CDFIs to work in a community when they're not there. So I'd love to actually know if anyone in the audience has a successful strategy for that. But what I found is actually once you get one CDFI, it's a very networked industry. And so they can help, like, for example, we invest in IFF, which is a CDFI, and they have been wonderful about opening doors to what they think might be aligned CDFIs who work elsewhere, but might want to come to work in our community based on what the CDFI's goals are and what our goals are. So that's sort of, you can leverage CDFIs to open up their network to bring in other CDFIs to your community. And then sort of how external partners, I mean, some still don't get what we're doing. Like, they're not really sure what it is that we're doing. Aren't we just supposed to be making grants? Like, I would say banks are sort of really scratch their head and look at us like, wait, are you trying to compete with us? And we're like, no, in fact, can we come in on a sidecar deal and we'll de-risk things? They're not really sure how to interact with us. And then I would say on the economic development side, we don't really have a strong ecosystem. And so some folks are glad that we're stepping into a space where there could be more robust activity. And we're also thinking about how do we build the capacity of local economic development, whether they're doing technical assistance, whether they're doing lending, whether it's the local government, how can we help them build their capacity so they can take a bigger leadership role in leading this space for our community?
Yeah. Val?
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think, we have one large statewide CDFI, the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund. It's physically located a block from our office. So we're really fortunate that in non-COVID times, we've been able to collaborate all the time. I think one sort of unique tool we've used is participations. So while we have loan capital at the loan fund, we also are participating in specific deals. So like Jillian said, we're de-risking it or even lowering the cost of capital. So the economics is a little bit better for the loan fund, and then we're able to rely on them for their underwriting expertise. That's kind of how we justify being willing to take a lower interest rate, is that we really heavily rely on their due diligence and underwriting expertise. We just don't have that in-house. So we've participated in some affordable housing opportunities, and then also some solar panels that have been put on different municipalities and nonprofit buildings. So that's been an interesting approach. I think one thing to keep in mind for sort of more traditional investment risk management, you kind of have a cap on how much you're willing to allocate to one intermediary. So in our investment policy statement for the impact investment pool, we have stated explicitly that we don't want over 20% of our impact investment capital invested in a single intermediary, just to kind of spread out the organizational risk a bit. However, given the opportunity set, every year we have to go back to our impact investment committee and ask for a waiver for that 20% cap for our local CDFI because they're such a good partner. And one thing that's important for our communication with the loan fund is that we've said over and over that we don't want to be in the business of competing with them either. So we really want to be catalytic. We don't want to take deals from them that they would have otherwise done. And so it's really important for us to have to maintain a good back and forth communication as opportunities present themselves. But I'm afraid I don't have much good advice for folks who don't have access to a local CDFI. I think for us, we've done a lot of networking, really just, it's a little bit harder with COVID, but just talking to as many people in the space as we can. We've uncovered some CDFIs that we're surprised we had never come across. Like there was one in Maine that does some work in our catchment area that we think we might be able to work with. So you might be able to weasel your way in from just having, derivatives of conversations with other people.
Great, thanks. So we have a question in chat. Travis Green, my colleague at LOCUS, said, I have to ask because this is a Candid event, but what data does your foundations leverage to help you do the work that's distinct from the data that the foundation uses in grant making? So what data are you using to actually get your local impact investing work done? Julie?
Yeah, so in 2020, we produced a capital flow report that brought together 3 streams of data. It was the Urban Institute's capital flow analysis in our county. It was looking at private investors in our community, both institutional and individual. And we did a community engagement, community voice on, what does a local equitable economy look like, feel like, what businesses would be in your community, things like that. And we sort of triangulated that into what we called our 2020 capital flow report. It sort of dispelled the myth that there is an opportunity. We at least documented over $600 million of potential investment opportunity in our community that we could get in partnership with, as could others. We continue to use that data on how to prioritize sectors that the community wants to see more investment in, as well as geographically where the community has been historically disinvested, as well as where is the community that wants investment that's interested in working with us. So that kind of set us up for the next couple of years. I know data has a short shelf life in this world, but it'll probably be the data that we use for the next couple of years, and where possible, we can refresh with other sort of side data sets, publicly available data sets. But we spent a lot of time trying to understand what was happening in the here and now, so we could understand where our investments could be most impactful.
Two really quickly. So when we first launched the program in 2016, we hired a consultant to do a landscape of the field. So to really help us get a deep dive on existing investments, impact investments. And actually we worked closely with the Maine Community Foundation and the Vermont Community Foundation. So just given the region that we're in, and we happen to be close to 2 other statewide community foundations, we kind of leveraged the time of this one consultant to do a state of the field across the board. It is, we still refer to it, but it was from 2016. So the data definitely gets stale quickly. I think one other, we've considered doing that again, just as the world has evolved. One other data resource that's been fascinating for us is, and it's more as part of our strategic planning process, is that we have a community listening team. So we used a consultant to help us find 50 folks in our community that that are BIPOC, minorities, women. Like we tried to get a true sampling of the community. They might not have even heard of the foundation prior to this. And we identified 50 folks to serve on this community. And then we worked with we worked with a consultant to help really flesh out what these people saw as the most important and pressing needs in the state. And what came out of that, I guess it's no surprise, but we were a bit surprised, is that the top issue that came out of that group was mental health. And so, of course, affordable housing was there and many other things, but mental health wasn't really an issue that was on our radar from an impact investment perspective. So it was really eye-opening for us on the impact investment team to start to think a little bit more broadly about how we might be able to address issues that have been identified by people in our community. And so that's something that we're working on right now.
Great. Thanks, Val. David asked this question and I'll second it. I'd love to get you to speak a little bit to this question. What's the one lesson that you've learned through this whole journey that you've been on that you wish you knew when you first started? And if it's one or two, I think that's okay too. So what do you know now that you wish you had known? In your case, Val, before you were born, when this work started, but what advice can you give to the folks on here who may not have even started this journey yet? So either one of you can start.
I'll jump in.
Val, go ahead.
So I only recently joined the foundation. I've only been here 2 years. So the foundation has been doing this work for a much longer than I've been here. But I think it's important to know that it's going to be, at least in our experience, it's been a pretty heavy lift for staff. And so, we have a third of my time, a third of a program officer's time, and then a teeny bit of our CFO's time. And that's not enough. So it's definitely, I think if you want to do it well and have success, I think that it's important to understand the amount of time that it takes to find deals, do the due diligence, monitoring, performance reporting. There's a lot that goes into it. So I think that that's just something, I think for whatever you think amount of time it's going to take, it's probably going to take more.
Jillian, what's your piece of advice or learning?
I would say that if you could bring a full enterprise mindset to this type of work and start from there. We learned the hard way. It got siloed in initially in community investment, and we ran into a number of challenges with that. But when we sort of did a refresh and made it a full enterprise, that's when we saw everything just start moving so much quicker in a positive way, as well as it allowed us to really understand what it takes to support this. And like Val said, it takes a lot more time. So it was me, our CFO, and our Vice President Philanthropy managing this. And we were able to see hands-on that we need more capacity. And now we're hiring a full-time professional to join our team to really manage and lead this work. So full enterprise and build your internal capacity. Those are two things I wish I knew we were going to be doing.
Great. Well, we are at time. I want to extend my thanks to both Val and Jillian. In the work that LOCUS does, there's nothing that's more influential for community foundations than hearing from other community foundations who are maybe one step ahead or a lot more ahead of it. So we really appreciate your time and being willing to share. And for all of you who were here to hear the stories and the journey, and to Candid for doing this. I think this is a really important conversation to have. So I will turn it back to anyone, or do we need to sign off, or can I tell folks to have a good day?
I want to extend my thanks to Deb, Val, and Jillian. This was such a great session. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your experiences, and I hope we will see you in our other sessions throughout the day. Thanks, everyone.